I'm Dr. Craig Escudé, the host of IDD Health Matters, a podcast where we talk about health, wellness, and health equity for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Hope you enjoy it. Welcome to this episode of IDD Health Matters. My guest today is Art Dykstra.
Yes.
Art, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you.
Tell us a little bit about what you do in this field.
Well, these days I wear a few hats. Primarily, I'm the director of the Trinity Foundation, which is
Trinity Foundation?
Yeah, which is a foundation that supports Trinity Services, which is a large social service organization, a statewide organization in Illinois. And so what we really are doing is providing additional resources and some planning capacity for the agency. I had been the CEO there for about 30 years before I came to the foundation. So that's what I'm doing most immediately. And in addition to that, I serve on the advisory committee of what we call NAQ, which is National Association for Developmental Disability Professionals. So kind of keeps me busy. I find it very interesting and very, very rewarding.
So how did you first get into the field of supports and services for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities?
Well, it wasn't something I intended to do. The fact of the matter was I was majoring in philosophy, and I went to a small school in Minnesota, and a job was posted in the student union saying they're looking for an athlete to play catch with a young teenager. So I thought, well, that sounds interesting. Somebody is probably hoping their son's going to be an all-star or something like that. And in those years, it was kind of a lot of money, to be honest about it. I thought, well, I could do that. So I went out to the place, and the woman came to the door. And I thought it was peculiar because when she looked at me kind of oddly. And I thought, it's kind of weird. And she said, hi, how are you? And I told her who it was, and she said, well, my husband and I are looking for someone who could help us with our son. And I said, and I understand you're wanting someone just to, kind of play football with him. I don't know, teach him how to receive. I'd been a football. And she said, yeah, but she said, do you know anything about autism? And I said, well, tell you the truth, I really don't. And she said, well, our son is a young man. He was probably 16 or 17 at the time. And he's kind of a handful. And so she went on to tell me the whole story that her husband was a dentist. He was so impaired they couldn't even go out to dinner. And they wanted somebody who was big enough so when he had a temper tantrum or destroyed things that you could kind of prevent him from doing it, not harm him. And I happened to go to a school called Bethel University. And because we had a religious affiliation, she wanted somebody who she thought by virtue or value wouldn't harm her son. So she said, does that sound like something you'd be interested in doing? I said, well, I'll give it a try. So maybe later that week, what I would do is I go over there a couple of times in the evening, sometimes on Saturdays, and I would basically characterize it as playing with him. I would keep him entertained. He was fascinated by railroad trains, and he would just go around and around and till the train fell off. And then unbeknownst to me, he would just get very angry. And then he would just throw things off the kitchen table. And then, I would try to prevent him and help him. And in some strange way, he and I became friends for about a year and a half till I graduated. The end of that story was I switched from majoring in philosophy to psychology. I thought, this is really interesting. Why don't people do that? And I had no really interest in psychology at the time either. But I realized I wasn't going to do a lot with philosophy either for that matter. But the interesting conclusion of that story was at my graduation, my mom and dad were there, and the couple was there. And they were crying after I graduated, and I introduced them to my parents. And my mom and dad said, why are they crying, Art? So I told them the whole story, and they were sad because I helped make a difference in their life. And that was how I got into it, saying, I wonder, basically then it was why people with autism did that. So I went on to get a master's degree in clinical psychology.
I'm going to interrupt you for a second because you said something really important. You made a difference in somebody's life.
Yeah.
And that had a major impact on that person and their family. And one of the reasons that we're doing these podcasts is to help people learn more about this field and that it can be a career path for them. And really what you described is you did direct support professional services essentially for that person. And that had a huge impact on that person's life. And I bet it probably had an impact on your life too.
Without a doubt, because, philosophy is not about ideas. And as I started then, the truth was I had the next most credits in psychology. And so then I began to think about maybe I should do something like that. I wasn't sure. And, but yeah, it was a turning point in my life to realize that you can help somebody else.
So you went on to work with Trinity, and so what are some of the services that Trinity?
Well, before that, I worked for the state of Illinois for 20 years, and during that time period, I worked as a psychologist, director of a lot of different programs. Most of the ones that I then became connected with were programs that had problems. And I was seen, I guess, as a younger person to try to bring change and energy to those situations. So then I, ultimately for 7 years, was a Chicago Regional Director for Developmental Disabilities in Illinois. And I was a director of 2 state facilities for a number of years. So after about 20 years or so, then I went to Trinity. And we were a very small organization when we started. I say we were just very blessed and helped meet a lot of people's needs. We were part of kind of the institutional movement, moving people out of state institutions, and became one of the larger residential providers in Illinois. And now one of the things we're also known for is the Illinois Crisis Prevention Network, which basically sends teams into homes and providers where somebody's at risk of losing their placement. So when I left, and still is for that matter, so a lot of people residentially have a reasonably large behavioral health program, family counseling center, typical day programs, day services, residential, but very rewarding.
So one of the things we talk about a lot here are health and health issues, health challenges, health equity. How did a person's health affect other things in their lives? What would you say? Can you speak to that some?
Yeah, I have to tell you a funny story about that. So during the time period I was a regional director, this kind of shows how old I am, I guess. We thought it would be good as a state to really put into regulations that providers should train their staff in a Heimlich maneuver. And I wouldn't claim I knew a lot about it, but I believed in it and actually helped a person one time who was choking.
So just for everybody, the Heimlich maneuver is the maneuver where when a person's choking, you kind of force air by compressing the stomach to help relieve that, right?
And today I think they call it something else, but in those days they were calling it the Heimlich maneuver. Well, what got me interested in that was a number of providers. So I was asked to talk with providers, get them on board. And what amazed me was a pushback that came from providers. And I remember one hot meeting where people were accusing me of bringing unfunded mandates to the provider community. And it escaped my thought, truly you're kidding me, that there is really no cost. Well, they claim there would be a cost. But to save lives I was flabbergasted. So I probably shouldn't have, but I dug in deeper and said, no, this is not right. If we can do something to help another human being, we have to do it. So that was it wasn't health in the way you're probably describing it, but it was absolutely fascinating to me. And then if you combine my time as a psychologist, my time as an administrator, there are many things that came to my attention. And they're obvious to everybody today, I'm sure as a physician, they're very obvious to me. They weren't to me. But the phenomenon, for example, of pain elicit aggression did dawn on me that a person might be acting, might be self-injurious if they had a terrible toothache.
Well, it's funny that you said it as a physician, it would be obvious to me. And that is not always the case. And that's one of the reasons I think it's so important for clinicians to have some training in that particular area and in general about health issues, health and wellness, how to provide healthcare to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. But yeah, and that behavior component and how behavior is communication, and it can be communicating some very treatable underlying conditions that don't necessarily require a psychiatric type treatment, right? Because it may not be a psychiatric problem.
Yeah. And that kind of how I maybe, started connecting the dots, maybe again, kind of going back to maybe kind of being a psychologist or something like that. But then I was fascinated by what we attributed to as characteristics of the person when I discovered other things were going on. And by no means that I know things that are technical, but I realized that some of the people that we were having particular problems with had horrendous sleep patterns. And you find out they've been up all night, and people were fighting with them, and then everything like that. And so, I've always been interested on on kind of that medical side of causation. I met a woman, she was a physician in Ohio, and I was talking to her, this was many years ago. And we had a person who engaged in self-injurious behavior. And what that person would do, he'd literally just bang his head on a table like this or on a desk. And he was really very, very nearsighted, and it just bothered me. And so I had a conversation with her, and she smiled and said that she had I don't know how she discovered it, but she had a person similar to that. And she said, and what we discovered is that when he did that, I don't know if it was, nanoseconds or 10 seconds, but that his vision cleared up. And I thought, this is fascinating to me, that someone, that would have never entered my mind either. But that's how you need expert opinion beyond yourself. Someone who, and she was kind of a physician, but she was also a researcher. So I became very interested in that. And so I think that we have I've left Trinity now, we have a very fine medical director, and we have wonderful nurses, and we depend on them a lot. I just value the nurses' contribution enormously. Well, you talked about having different observations by different people in different disciplines. So speaking to that multidisciplinary approach, interdisciplinary approach, and maybe the need for mental health clinicians and practitioners to work together with physical health clinicians, because oftentimes, the mind affects our bodies, and our bodies affect our mind. And there's a lot of interrelation there. So it makes sense for those clinicians to really work together and provide support for each other to help. Sometimes cases are challenging to figure out what's going on. And when you have more heads that you put together with varying degrees of experience, you'd be more likely to come up with what you're looking for, right?
Friends for Life Residential Care, specializing in support for individuals with developmental disabilities, offers services like adult day support and home health care. Emphasizing empowerment and quality of life, we live by the motto, "My ability is stronger than my disability." We are currently hiring, welcoming those passionate about making a difference. Learn more and explore career opportunities at friendsforliferc.com.
I'm Dr. Craig Escudé, President of Intellectability. State developmental disability agencies, managed care organizations, and providers across the United States use Intellectability's health risk screening tool, e-learn courses, and person-centered training to improve health equity for people with IDD. Visit replacingrisks.com to learn more about how you can employ these tools with people you support. So, one of the things that I like to ask our guests to think about, and to share with the audience, are some things that you would say that the field, or that people who are listening can do, can participate in, can become active with, related to improving health and wellness and supports and services for people with disabilities. So are there some things, with all the experience that you have, that you might recommend that can improve the overall support network for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities? And what I usually say is 3 things in 3 minutes, but we don't have to hold to that. So, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I think this answers your question. One of the things I've been intrigued with, and we've been talking about this a lot, is the contributions of positive psychology, particularly in terms of the concept of well-being. And there's really what I would characterize as 6 pillars of positive psychology. There's experience of positive emotions, engagement, having good and healthy relationships, of experiencing meaning in our lives, of accomplishing things, experiencing health and vitality. And I think that if others are not familiar, that would take the time to investigate that, because it kind of parallels what you're talking about, how things all fit together. Mm-hmm. And what I like about that is that approach to life and living one's best life is more than just thinking about happiness. And I'm reading a book right now, and one of the things he talks about is that sort of the nature of our becoming ourselves is to accept ourselves, to know ourselves, kind of the same thing, to check on ourselves.
First, know thyself. Yeah. That sounds familiar, right?
Yes. So, and then it's checking on yourself, and I would add the notion of bettering yourself. And finally, I think in terms of anybody watching who's thinking about a career, especially in health or in the field of intellectual or disabilities, is to transcend yourself and to understand the joy of serving others. And I think that's really where contentment in our lives unfolds. I think it's where joy unfolds. It's not about happiness, but it's also about the experience, I think, of enoughness. That you finally come to a point in your life where you recognize that you don't have to be in a rat race. And I have found I have no regrets in my life. Trying to serve others, I haven't always done the best job, I suppose. But that's been my intent. And my intent is to be more grateful today than I was yesterday.
That's wonderful advice for all of us in our own lives, and in turn can help us have positive influences in people around us. And I like what you talked about, happiness and joy, and kind of the distinction there. Happiness is kind of a fleeting emotion that we experience in different ways at different times. And life is not all happy. Yeah. We're not always happy. Yeah. And there are things and challenges that we have to deal with. But joy is more of maybe, would you say, an overall mindset?
Yeah, and I think it's something, just as you said, it's something that happens inside of us. It's not a fleeting sensation. It's really, it's a peaceful place to be. And that's, by the way, no one ever achieves it. It's like, wow, I'm walking around, there's one cool guy.
And accepting the fact that you're not always going to be joyful or happy or whatever it can actually bring peace. Yeah. And you recognize sometimes we do suffer through things, right? Yeah.
Well, I think the goal is how you experience those things, to try to have a positive mindset. And I think that also makes difficult times, even in your job or your life, a lot easier.
Yeah. Yeah. So in terms of working in this field, if there are people listening that have an interest, are there things you would maybe advise them to do to learn more about the field?
Yeah, I think there's all kinds of ways of doing it. There's the obvious one of volunteering, of visiting an organization. The truth was, until I started working at then was a state hospital, I'd never been in an organization that served people with disabilities. I saw people with Down syndrome, at our church and stuff, but I had no knowledge. I wish I would have. Wish I would have had that experience. But yeah, I think I think the issue of volunteering, visiting an organization in your community, checking them out, read about it, find out, there's so much going on today in neuroscience, in whether it's, in healthcare. Considering being a nurse in the IDD field is, I think, very rewarding, also very challenging, as we know. But yeah, I think just exposing yourself and just paying attention, and who knows, you may end up having a calling.
You certainly may. Well, Art, it's been wonderful hearing about the work that you've done in this field. You've given us a lot of things to think about, including the concept of just being joyful in life about things. And I'm happy that you agreed to be a part of this, and I think your work has brought joy to many people over the years. And so thank you for being a part of the podcast, and thank you for the work that you've done in this.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I very much appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much.
Sure thing.